Remember when you were told every rhythm with a delta wave is WPW? Well, that shit ain't true. You can have a rhythm with a delta wave that is not WPW. So, let's talk about it. First, a quick review of WPW and what it is. WPW is a pre-excitation syndrome from the atria and into the ventricles through an accessory pathway called the Kent bundle. If the Kent bundle extends from the left atrium and into the left ventricle, it is called type A WPW. And if it extends from the right atrium into the right ventricle, it is called type B WPW. And they both have different findings on the EKG, but that's a lesson for a different day. In a normal heart, the only place where an impulse should travel from the atria into the ventricles is through the AV node. Now, in the case of WPW, as the impulse travels down the internodal pathways and through the Buckman's bundle across the atria, the impulse is slowed down by the AV node to allow for atrial kick. But because there is an accessory pathway between an atrium and a ventricle, it starts activating the ventricle prematurely. And then this impulse has to depend on myocyte to myocyte to myocyte transmission across the ventricular wall. But before it can reach the Purkinje network, the original impulse is released by the AV node and the His bundle and down the superconductive pathway bundle branches, and it reaches the Purkinje network. And once it meets the impulse that's coming down the accessory pathway, they cancel each other out and they cause for ventricular contraction. And all of this gives us our two most important criteria for WPW. A delta wave, which represents that slow myocyte to myocyte transmission until it catches up with the original impulse and gives you the rest of your QRS complex, and a short PR interval. Remember, the Kent bundle bypasses the AV node, so having a short PR interval is critical finding for WPW. Now, is it possible to have a delta wave but a normal PR interval? The answer is yes. If you remember the anatomy of the AV node, at the very top is the transition zone, which receives the impulse from the internodal pathways. The center is the compact zone. This area is responsible for slowing down the conduction to allow for atrial kick. And the very last part is the trigger zone, which shoots down the impulse down the His bundle and the left and right bundle branches. Now, there is another accessory pathway that can extend from the end of the AV node, but right before the trigger zone of the His bundle, and extend either in the left or the right ventricle. And just like the Kent bundle, start depolarizing the ventricle from myocyte to myocyte. This accessory pathway is called the Mayheim fibers, which will give you a delta wave but a normal PRI.